My name is Neil Pettigrew. I am the Vice President of Exploration for GT Resources. GT Resources is a copper-nickel focused company. We have projects in Finland and Canada, and we have been active in the last several years advancing these projects, everything from the 42-1 resource level to earlier stage grassroots projects. I'm very glad that. Yep.
Well, sorry, Neil. Good to see you here. I think where are you at the moment? Actually,
I'm located in Thunder Bay, Ontario, so quite close to some of our projects.
Okay. Well, look, I guess the thing I'm kind of keen to do is going to pick up a conversation I had with Derek back at Beaver Creek in September, which is to understand like what companies do in markets like this. I think people get a little bit excited about metals prices, but doesn't necessarily translate into action for exploration companies, unless, like you, they've got a decent amount of money in the bank, which you have. So what have you been doing with your money?
The treasury is obviously what people focus on with us, but we also have a very interesting suite of projects, right? And of course, with my role, I'm very much involved with these projects. And so I'm very glad to be here today to speak to you about these projects. The main focus this past year has been our Canalask project, which you actually see up on the screen here. This is an isometric view of the project along with a cross section. But to give you a bit of background on this project, this was a former Falconbridge project just before they were taken over by Extraton. Of course, they're now known as Glencore. But it is a massive sulfide, high-grade nickel copper project located in the Yukon. And it's a bit unique in the Yukon in that we're only 4 kilometers off the Alaska highway. So literally I can walk from the highway to this project. And for the Yukon, that's a rare thing. You know, it is not necessarily a helicopter-only proposition.
Right. Okay, but we're after nickel predominantly. Is that what we're looking for?
It is more focused on the nickel. You're going to see about 2-to-1 nickel to copper on this project, but you do get quite a bit of copper and some PGEs as well. So there's historically been some higher PGE samples.
Okay, so and I just want to make sure we understand what type of, because we obviously speak weekly about nickel with Mark Selby over at his project, the Canada Nickel. It's a very different proposition to this. This is a much higher grade. Yep. So maybe describe it for people if you don't mind.
Sure. So this is a high-grade, massive sulfide nickel copper project. And so unlike the Canadian nickel ones, which are really about a novel style of bulk tonnage nickel, this is the bread and butter of what has been mined historically is this style. In fact, there was development on this project in the 50s and 60s where they actually drove and added it and put a couple of levels in to see whether or not they might be able to mine it. And so it has a historic resource. I mean, it's a very old resource and it's, it needs to be updated. But it is a little bit beyond the grassroots stage in that there's been a bit of work put into it. And we think there's great potential for more to be found.
Right. So what's the process? What's the plan right now? Okay, because it's always about understanding what you're going to be able to do with this thing with the money that you've got in the market that we see ourselves in within a time frame. Because people need to take a view on the potential of this thing, because it's going to be a while before maybe you put any new economics on this, right?
Yeah, we're a little ways from new economics. We're still at the discovery stage from this. We're being very judicial with our exploration dollars. As you mentioned, the market has not been kind, but these are very good projects, and so we work to advance them. This past summer was our very first drill program on this project. And so, we've had a couple of news releases to that effect with some very high-grade nickel intercepts from the historic footwall zone, which is in the upper right corner here. And so our goal is to continue to advance this and pursue the main target, which is this basal unit here, the ultramafic dike, where we believe that there is good potential for massive sulfide accumulation. Because this footwall deposit is sitting in these hanging footwall rocks, and it doesn't get there without something in the main body. And so that's really what we're chasing is the main deposit here. We think the footwall is sort of an indicator that there is a larger system at work.
Right. So how much data did you have before, which you've narrated, looked at, studied, and worked out what you want to do with it? And then how much have you done since you've picked this up?
We inherited a good deal of data from this. We also have, we're fortunate to have Glencore as a significant investor in the company, and some of that data came from their private files, actually. So this has been a focus for them as well as us. Since we picked up the property, we have done some high resolution drone mag. We also did a ground EM survey to resolve the targets a bit better. And that was followed up, as I say, by this summer's first pass drill program on the project. So not a huge program, 5 holes, 1,000 meters, but it really was the first drilling this project has seen since the 90s.
And right, and so let's be clear about the purpose of that specific type of drilling where you've done it. Basically, the drill modeling. Can you explain why that was the most efficient use of or allocation of capital?
Well, mostly there had been a lot of geophysics done in the past. And so you do reach a point where you have to test some targets. And so, as I mentioned before, the project had not been drilled since the 90s. It had been kind of sitting in a gold company for the last several years since it was, left Falconbridge, I think in 2008, during that acquisition period from Xstrata. And so, we had a bunch of well-developed drill targets. And so that's sort of what we had focused on in this program, which was both the footwall, which is in the upper right, as well as the main ultramafic dike here, as you can see in the center part of this image. And if I'll just flip to the next slide here, this is the footwall zone. And so this was the focus of the last couple of news releases that we had out. And as you can see, some very nice grades, 2% nickel over 20 to 30 meters in 2 of these holes. It was actually a little bit higher than we expected. The historic resource in this area is actually more about 1.4%. And so we actually did a bit better. And as I mentioned, the interest with this zone is really, why is this here? How do you remobilize this into the footwall zone? We believe that there is a connection between this footwall-hosted style of mineralization and the main ultramafic dike. And chasing that connection is really going to be our plan going forward.
To what end?
To the end of finding that much larger body, right? So there is a hint, and I'm going to jump back another slide here, is that this hole, VQ7, which we have highlighted here, was really the only hole to have tested this gabbro unit at the base. And it hit a different style of nickel copper mineralization. It had disseminated as well as rip-up class of semi-massive sulfide, and that sort of indicates that that type of system is alive and well in the main dike. And so that's really what we believe the main target is that gabbro unit at the base of the ultramafic dike, and that there was a connection somewhere between the footwall style and the gabbro-hosted style here at Canalask.
Okay, so what I'm trying to, you're explaining to me what you're doing. I want to understand in terms of the hypothesis, what you think the potential is here. Why should I be excited about this? And when can I get excited about this? If you can't tell me the why.
Yeah, I can tell you the why is because these type of deposits are economic even in the current cycles, right? So when you have high-grade sulfide that is running, 2+% nickel, plus other credits, copper, PGEs, that stuff is still economic in the current cycle. And so that material is also what the smelters are looking for, is that high-grade material, right? So a lot of the cons from these new bulk tonnage nickel deposits are not really what the smelters want. There's big penalties on the magnesium and stuff like that, and those concentrates, whereas this type of material is what those smelters are set up to process. And so, this is the prize, is that you're looking at a, I'm not going to say world-class, but could be very nice, mid-tier, profitable, easily accessible mine that could be put in production without, a multi-billion-dollar price tag.
Right. And you're obviously with the Glencore, I mean, they own 1 or 2 smelters, don't they? It's been rumored.
Yep.
Is that why they're in this?
Well, definitely. So, I mean, they are keen to feed those smelters, right? And they're also keen to find this type of mineralization. So they are out there hunting for that high-grade nickel copper sulfide, right? That is what they are doing. And this is the type of deposit that can produce that type, right? So that's why we're also here, is that we are interested in that high-grade sulfide-hosted mineralization.
Okay. And what? Okay, 5,000 meters. You said. I said 5 holes. You said, right? Is that what you said? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And how many meters? How many meters?
Just 1,000 meters. It was a first pass.
First pass. Okay. So second pass comes up when, and what do you
pass
get
is
after?
next year. It is a seasonal thing up in Yukon, even with the access we have. And so we'd be looking at doing another follow-up program. What I would draw your eye to on the screen actually is one of the major results of this program is we found that the dike dips more steeply. And so than the original shallow drilling suggested. And so we plan to drill from the footwall this time to target that Gabbro horizon. So collaring up here where the B is basically and drilling down. And that will give us much better ground conditions and, allow us to drill much more effectively than we discovered drilling from the ultramafic dike where we had very thick overburden and challenging ground conditions within the ultramafic itself.
Right. Okay. And so it's seasonal. So literally, are we talking about when would you get back in there?
It would be basically in the spring. So we'd be looking at a start date sometime May at the earliest, June likely, right? It's about a 4-month season for the good weather up there.
Okay. And a phase 2 program would look like what, do you think?
A phase 2 program would be a slightly more meters. We would be targeting, once again, that favorable Gabbro horizon and also where that connection might occur between the footwall style deposit and the ultramafic dike itself.
Right. Which in English, for the layman listening to this, what does that look like? And what does success look like?
Success would look very much like those grades that we were hitting in the footwall zone, the 20 to 30 meters, 2% nickel found within this Gabbro unit, because then we would have much more strike extent and down dip extent to chase.
Right.
And so things could develop very quickly on the tonnage side.
Right. And in this market, I know you're a geologist, but in this market...
Still affected by this market, yes.
Still affected by this market, but how many tons at those sorts of grades in terms of whether you're looking at peers, whether you're looking at the market or historic or otherwise, how many tons would you need to be looking at before you started going, okay, this might be enough or of interest to a smelter?
Oh, I think you could get there with even 5 to 10. I don't think you need to be over the moon because it's the access, right? So, this isn't, it's in the Yukon, but it's not, it's 4 kilometers off a paved highway, right? So, it's not remote, right? And so that's why the threshold and the ultimate CapEx costs would be much lower for this property.
What else have you been up to?
So the other project that we just had a news release about is actually our North Rock project. And this one's a little closer to home. This is in Northwest Ontario. And this was a project that we acquired when we acquired Metal Corp back in 2023. And with that acquisition came a few different projects, all Ontario-based at that moment. But this was one that had not been worked for some time and was actually quite intriguing to me personally because it is another nickel-copper system, except this one's much more weighted to copper. And so it's very copper-rich. There is some nickel with it. There is some PGEs with it as well, some very high platinum, palladium, and occasional samples. But it has not really had much significant work since about 2007. The main thrust of this thing is it's a very large Gabbro sill, and the base of this sill, there is a 13-kilometer wide mineralized horizon that has just really not been well explored. There's been some drilling along it, and that's why we know that it's a mineralized horizon, is there's been copper hit along this trend. But in the center of it, as you can see, there is another historic resource. And this actually had a shaft and development put down by Noranda in the 70s. And they outlined just over 1 million tons of 1.2% copper. And so some of that material is on surface. They actually have about a 10,000 ton ore lobe that they had set aside. And it's some nice looking stuff. And so we're really kind of interested to find additional mineralization along that trend.
Okay, so same set of questions, really. So you knew a fair bit going into this, what you had. So what have you spent on it, on what and why?
So we haven't really spent much on this yet. And so in the news release that just came out, you'll see that we're putting out that it's basically starting the fall program. And so in this regard, we have started downhole EM. One of the main goals of that program is to chase the mineralization at the Beaver Pond zone. So I'm just going to flip down to the next slide. This is a cross-section of the Beaver Pond zone looking to the northeast. And what we see here is the old shaft up here at the top from Noranda. And obviously, the majority of the drilling is above 200 meters, so very shallow. Some of these zones, as you can see here, aren't too shabby. You're looking at, over 50 meters of 0.8% copper, some narrower, higher grade zones that are, 3.3% or 1.5, and some zones with quite high PGEs, as you can see down here. You're looking at, almost half an ounce of PGEs in some of these things. So the main thrust is we're going to be doing borehole EM on this long hole. This is actually the longest hole on the project. And it never hit the mineralized horizon. It hit footwall style. And this is an interesting one. Just like Canalask, there is mineralization within the main Gabbro body. And then there's vein style, footwall style, if you're familiar with Sudbury Camp at all, of high-grade copper PGE veins in the footwall rocks. And so we think it came close, but it never actually got into the main mineralized zone. And so we're going to do some borehole and see whether or not there is some mineralization adjacent to that hole that was missed years ago. It was drilled back in 2006.
Okay, so you're not spending a bunch of money on this, are you? A couple $100,000, that sort of level.
Well, this is the initial stage. So I mean, we are just starting to, we tend to be very focused at GT, so we try not to be all over the place. And so we have Canalasks on the go. We're just starting to get work done on North Rock. North Rock has scale. So, if I go back to this other slide again, I really want to emphasize this 13-kilometer mineralized trend. We're talking about stuff just right down here at the Beaver Pond zone, but we have a very large trend. And to make an analog to another one of our projects, the LK project in Finland, it started out kind of similar, where we had a very large mineralized trend. In that case, we had about 28 kilometers of mineralized trend. And we were very successful at finding other mineralization along it by just systematically doing the geophysics and testing those anomalies, and built up that LK resource, to about 90 million tons. So, we think there might be potential to do something here as well. And unlike LK, you have the potential for higher grade net texture to massive sulfide here as well.
Right. Okay. So you're tickling things forward. The market's not giving yet much reward for anything at the moment, certainly not done at Explore Code, unless it's extraordinary. So your hope here with North Rock is what? What would give you the confidence to kind of move forward with a little bit more money? I get the cash preservation thing in this market. It absolutely makes sense, and that's probably why you've got big reserves where others haven't. But at the same time, if the market's not going to do enough heavy lifting for you, you're going to have to show something.
Correct. And so I think that if we see some very nice conductors in this downhole geophysical survey, that would give us potential to chase higher grades than what it was historically hit, right? So like if you grab an individual sample out of that stockpile on surface, it's nothing to grab 5, 6, 7, 8% copper. Right? So there was better mineralization than that historic resource sort of suggests. That's sort of an average of that area. And so if the system can produce that type of grades, then there's a chance for it to occur elsewhere. And so we're going to be looking for some of those conductors. And if we see that, then that would justify further expenditures. There is also bulk tonnage potential along that 13-kilometer trend to find more of that type of grades that you see right there. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach. We know we have this bulk tonnage potential, but I'm quite interested in that footwall style veining.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of time in copper nickel in the Sudbury camp. Those things paid a lot of the bills for Inco and Falconbridge back in the day, right? Some of the in situ value of that footwall style mineralization can be quite impressive.
So this one has a scale. It's also got a lot of it's 12,000 meters of historic drilling.
Yep.
Which have you been through the process of reinterpreting that or doing anything with that data?
So compiling that data, that did come all digital to us with the Metal Corp acquisition. They had pretty good records. So everything from about 2005 forward. We're in possession of that digital data. The core is all still there too. Like this is not a difficult project to access. As you can see in this image, this is the Trans-Canada Highway. This is the rail line, and that's the hydro line coming through there, right? So you've got as much infrastructure as you could ask for. Cell service on the site, right? So it is it's not a difficult project to work, basically.
Okay, interesting. So that's 1.2% copper, lots of historic data with core. And by the way, it's kind of easy to gloss over that, but a lot of these projects usually come with the data, but without the core. And that validation process is just that little bit harder and more expensive. So no, that's interesting. Okay. Well, look, I think for me, just as me sort of checking in with you guys, appreciate the update, Neil. I really, really do. And I'm interested to see what happens for 2020, 2025. Do you want to give us a kind of summary of what the expectation is for 2025?
Sure. So 2025, these projects are currently our focus, right? So Canalask, the high-grade nickel at the base of that ultramafic dike is really kind of the focus. At North Rock, it is once again the base of this gabbro, 13-kilometer trend, and looking for higher grades. We're really focusing on our projects that have the potential to produce that high-grade, massive sulfide type mineralization. And that stuff still gets attention in today's market.
Okay. Neil, appreciate your time. I'll ring up the big guy and maybe talk to him a little bit about the markets for 2025 and how he's coming at it. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew.